Nachman brings in concepts and positions that are characteristic of Jewish mysticism, and particularly what's called Lurianic Kabbalah. Why is it called Lurianic Kabbalah? Some of you probably already know, but I'm not sure what everybody knows. So I'll mention B'Kitzur in a short form. Rabbi Isaac Luria was one of the most important framers of medieval Jewish mysticism, even though, like most writers, he pretended, and those he pretended that the material was of much, much greater antiquity. This is true in general with regard to rabbinic material, and not just rabbinic material, even within the Torah itself. The older something is, the more authoritative it is. Therefore, even though there are rabbinic concepts that clearly are, let's say, late antique or medieval, they are portrayed as being, as they say, Torah LaMoshe Sinai. It is Torah that was given to Moses at Sinai. Well, maybe not exactly, but that's the point, is to give it to stress its ancient and antique authenticity. That's true here as well. One of the other areas that one needs to pay particular attention to, and this is related to Jewish mysticism, yes, but in different directions, either a certain form of Jewish mysticism or rabbinic texts in general, and that is the use of numbers. There's a whole range of numbers that are part of this story: 40 and 70 and 7 and 4 and so on and so forth, all of which have very powerful and well-known meanings in rabbinic Judaism, but also in mystical sources. When Nachman is using a number in a mystical sense or in a folkloristic sense, is not always easy to figure out. But here's the interesting part of it. The significance of numbers becomes a part of Jewish mysticism that is its own domain. We might call it numerology if we weren't Jews, but the Jewish term is gematria. And you probably have heard of gematria. Every letter in the Hebrew alphabet has a numerical equivalent. So every letter has a numerical equivalent. So every word has a certain numerical value. And one of the odd and interesting sorts of ways that the rabbis, methodology for doing interpretation, is to compare words, or even letters sometimes, that have the same numerical value. So probably the best known example of this is I'm sorry? Is somebody saying something? All right. Best known example of this might be the word, let's say, l'chaim. Okay? Chai means what? Does anybody know? Huh?
18, doesn't it?
Life.
The numerical equivalent is 18, and the word itself means life. So whenever you see the number 18, the association with the word life comes into play, which is why when you give a gift for a birthday or a wedding or whatever, and you want to give money to the bride and groom and so forth, how many dollars, for example, do you give?
18.
If you're a cheap son of a bee, yes.
But
if you're not a cheap son of the bee, you give 36. And why do you give 36?
Multiples.
Double high.
It's double high. And the word for life, high means live, really. What's the actual word for life? L'chaim. It's two highs. Follow me? The yim indicates plural in Hebrew. So l'chaim for life is 2 36s two 18s, so it's 36. It's not a bad thing to give only 18, but somebody might come along and say, why didn't you give 36? Now, they probably shouldn't do that, but somebody will. Okay. So all of this comes into play, and Nachman has no problem mixing and matching all these different ways of understanding the words that he is conjuring with. I want to spend time on the story, so I'm going to stop there. We may have time to come back to some of these ideas a little bit later. But let's look at the story itself and see where that takes us. So I think everybody should have a copy of the story that's available. Am I right? Does everybody have a copy of the story?
Not in front of us. Not in front of me.
You mean The Lost Princess?
The Lost Princess, yeah.
Yeah.
Everybody should have a copy of The Lost Princess, no?
Kim sent out a link,
Kim will take care of it.
and I printed mine out because it's always easier for me to read.
Okay, so let me ask the next question. Has everybody read the story?
Yeah.
I have.
I'm getting a feeling that maybe some did not. That's okay, if you didn't. I just need to know what I can assume and what I can't. All right. So let's do a quick, we have to be very disciplined, a quick read through, because this may not be topmost in mind for everybody.
Okay, can you all see the story?
Not yet.
No.
Oh, really?
We can
I
see the
folder.
file folder. We saw the file
Oh,
folder.
Just a second, then. I see the problem.
We don't. Ah, good.
Good. So we're
And I'm going to let Rabbi Baker have control in terms of being able to scroll. Okay.
Okay, thanks, Kim. I appreciate that. I'm always happy when I can have control. There's so many areas in my life where I don't. Okay, so I'm going to do something I normally wouldn't do. Because I'm familiar with the story, I'm going to read through it. And maybe once in a while I'll call on somebody to take a paragraph when my voice gets tired, but I don't want to take any more time than we have to. So, and I would like you to be able to listen to it. So here we go. There once was a king who had 6 sons and 1 daughter. His daughter was very dear to him, but one day he became angry with her and said, "Go to the devil." That night the princess went to her chamber to sleep, but in the morning she could not be found. And when her father, the king, realized she was missing, he was filled with sorrow and remorse. And he began to search for her everywhere. Then the king's minister, seeing that the king was distressed, asked to be given a servant and a horse and enough silver for expenses so that he might search for her. So it was that the minister traveled through the entire realm to search for the lost princess, across deserts and mountains, through forests and fields. He searched for her for many years. One day, as he was traveling in a desert, he glimpsed a path he had never seen before, and he said to himself, "Oh, since I've been searching for the princess in the desert such a long time, perhaps I will follow this path and come to a city." After following the paths, perhaps a great distance, he finally arrived at a splendid palace guarded by many soldiers. Now this mountain was afraid the guards would not let him enter, but still he dismounted and walked toward the palace, and to his surprise, the gatekeeper opened the gate for him at once without asking any questions. This is secretly why I wanted to read the story. Some of you may be familiar with a song from the holidays, "Open for me the gates of righteousness. I will come in singing God's praise." The idea here is you see throughout the whole story that getting into places turns out not to be nearly as hard as the minister is afraid that it might. This is important. Okay. From there, he passed from the courtyard into the palace, and after that he entered the chamber of the king, who commanded all the troops. Nor did anyone try to stop him from entering the presence of the king. There, many musicians played their instruments conducted by the king, and the minister stood off in a corner of the royal chamber and waited to see what would happen. After a while, the king commanded his servants to bring in the queen, and the musicians sang and played as she entered the room. And when they led her to the throne, the ministers saw that she was the lost princess. Okay. Either I'm going to move this, Kim, or you are, but
Okay.
it's tough if we both try to do it. Is that okay?
Okay. You can do it.
Thank you. Before long, the queen looked up and saw the minister in the corner of the chamber and recognized him at once. Then she rose from her throne and said, "Do you recognize me?" And he replied, "Yes, you are the lost princess. But how did you come to be here?" And she answered, "Because of that evil word that escaped from the mouth and lips of my father, for this is the palace of the evil one." Who are we talking about here, by the way?
Satan.
Satan, right, very good. All right. The minister told her, please. The king was very sad in her absence, and that he had sent the minister to find her, and that he had been searching for many years. After this, he asked her, "How can I take you away from here?" She replied, "It is not possible to free me until you have one place for a year, and throughout the year yearn to set me free. And on the last day of that year, you must fast and not sleep for a full day and a night. We're back at the high holy days, as in open the gates of righteousness, and I will enter them, praising God." Then the minister left that palace and did as she said. He went to a forest and made his home there. And at the end of the year, on the last day, he fasted and did not sleep. But that day he noticed a tree on which very beautiful apples were growing. He desired them very much, and finally rose and plucked one of the apples. But as soon as he ate it, he fell down and sleep snatched him away. He slept for a very long time. And although his servant shook him, he could not wake him up. Okay, what story are we referring to here?
The Garden of Eden.
Garden of Eden.
That's in part, but who eats an apple and goes to sleep? World literature.
Sorry, wait.
Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs.
Snow White.
Snow White
Snow
and the
White.
Seven Dwarfs, very good. And Snow White is who? The lost princess, don't you think?
Yeah.
Yeah, this is where folklore and fairy tales begin to merge. And by the way, this idea of falling asleep for long periods of time is not just a feature of this story, but of other stories. Can you think of another famous one in American literature?
Rip Van Winkle.
Rip Van Winkle, very good. Okay, which is, by the way, why in current parlance, to be politically aware is called what?
What? Woke?
Woke. With most of the time we're going around being asleep. And now we are woke. Okay, that's another story. All right. Or he could not wake him up. When at last the minister woke from his sleep, he asked his servant, "Where am I?" And the servant told him, "You are in a forest where you have been sleeping for 40 years. And all that time I sustained myself with nuts and fruits." The minister despaired, but found his way back to the palace of the lost princess, and there he met her again in the chamber of the king. When she saw him, she could have taken. When she saw him,
No, she was filled.
She was filled with sadness. Thank you, and said, "Had you come on that day, you could have taken me from here. But because of that one day, all has been lost. Still, I understand that fasting is very difficult, especially on the last day, for then the evil inclination becomes most powerful. Therefore, return and dwell again for another year, but on the last day you are permitted to eat. However, do not sleep and do not drink any wine, lest you sleep, for it is important above all to remain awake." Isn't this kind of odd? That the solution is to give the minister permission to eat. Isn't that kind of counterintuitive? Well, maybe not. All right. Then he went and did as she said, and on the last day of the long year, he saw for the first time a spring whose water were reddish and whose smell was that of wine. What do we recall here?
Jesus turning water to wine.
That is a very good point. This is a story that comes from the folks who daven in the other show, but not only that. Even within the Torah, we know about a spring or flowing something that turns red.
Oh, the Nile.
The Nile River during the plagues, right? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. The minister pointed out the spring to his servant, and then went and tasted of its waters, only to fall asleep again. And this time he slept for 70 years. 70 is a big number, the number of people in the Sanhedrin. And by the way, it is because it's 7 times 10. The two perfect numbers. The perfect number in the Torah, the perfect number in Greek thought. It's used by the rabbis to mean completeness. You want to say that you've exhausted a category, you say there are 70 of it. So for example, how many nations in the world are there according to the rabbis?
70.
70, there you go. Near the end of that time, many soldiers, then he went and did as she said, and on the last day, he saw for the first time a spring whose water was reddish and whose smell was that of wine. The minister pointed out the spring to his servant, and near the end of that time, many soldiers passed by, and the servant concealed himself. And after the troops had passed, a carriage came by in which sat the lost princess. As soon as she recognized the minister, she left the carriage and approached him, and although she shook him very strongly, he did not wake up, and he began to lament, saying that he had made such a great effort and suffered for so many years to free her, and because of one error, on that last day he had lost everything. She wept greatly over this, and then took the scarf from her head and wrote a message on it with her tears, and left it next to the sleeping minister. Then she returned to her carriage and drove away. In Torah, who is the image of the woman who cries tears? Where does that come from? It's Rachel crying for her children. A very famous image in the early part of Genesis. So there's a comparison here to one of the matriarchs. She's not just a princess; she is like Rachel. All right. She drove away. Not long after, the minister awoke and asked his servant, "Where am I?" The servant told him that all that had happened about the troops that had passed by there, the carriage that had stopped, and how the lost princess had tried to wake him. "How long have I been asleep?" he asked. 70 years, the replied. And the minister saw the scarf and said, "Where did this come from?" And the servant told him that the lost princess had written on it with her tears. So the minister took it and lifted it up towards the sun and read the message that was written there. He said it was no longer to be found in the palace of the evil one, but from then on, she would make her home in a palace of pearls on a golden mountain, and it was there that he would find her. Okay, so now the story has moved magically to a different location. What do you suspect? A lot of possibilities. The mountain made out of pearls might be referring to.
I just imagine heaven.
Mount Sinai,
Wisdom.
where the pearls are the pearls of wisdom from the Torah.
Both are possibilities. Yes, you know the expression "pearls before swine," right?
Yes. Yeah.
So I think it has. I think that heaven is a possibility here as well, because after all, where is it that God, as it were, dwells, and from where does God give the Torah? That would be at the top of the mountain, and it is Mount Sinai is shrouded in clouds.
Well, I
There's
think
also- go
the
ahead.
fact that she can only leave there, you can't walk out of there, but you have to fly.
Well, we're going to get there. We haven't got there yet, but
Yeah,
yes,
but suggests that it's some kind of non-earthly place.
right. Very good point. Okay, so not long after the minister woke in, no, okay. We find her. So the minister left his servant and went off alone to search for her. He searched for many years. Finally, he decided that such a palace of pearls could not be found in any inhabited place, for by then he knew well the map of the world. This is a very lovely little point. The maps don't help you. Why not? Why don't maps help you?
Because maps can only be drawn about places that other people know about, not something
Right.
you have to discover for yourself.
Well, and it's almost a different order of experience, isn't it, Michael? I mean, it's we're talking about where something is located, which is not, as it were, of this world. It is something that supersedes this
Yeah.
world. So wherever it is, it's not going to be found the way you find the Broadway IRT.
But the other thing too, Kerry, is that
Yes.
A map that I made couldn't be used by you because each of us has to find our own map.
Well, insofar as the map is a map that refers to something internal, something that is not part of objective, as it were, reality,
Right.
not part of nature, then yes, that's
Right.
true.
Right.
And that, by definition, is what we're talking about. We're talking about a search, and this is an important feature, that is on an important level within ourselves as individuals, a search that is within our community or our people, maybe even our nation. There is something about the internal quality of this search that the story wants to insist on. All right. He searched for many years. Therefore, he decided to, he encountered a giant who carried a tree for a staff. Then the minister told him the whole story of the lost princess and how he was searching for a palace of pearls on a golden mountain. So, what are these staff? Why are trees being carried as staffs? What do the trees refer to? It is a tree of life to them who hold fast to it. All of its supporters are happy. We know that song, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So these giants, it have to be giants because they're going to carry trees. They're carrying trees, and that's to say they're carrying the Torah. By the way, just to show the completeness of these kinds of images, do you know what the Hebrew term is for the two little rods that the scroll of the Torah are wrapped around, and you have the little handles that you use to roll the Torah back and forth? You know what they're called?
No.
They're called eitzim, trees.
Oh, okay.
I thought I gave like a huge clue there, but okay.
Yeah, well,
It might have been really obscure anyhow.
it would have been a guess, not knowing. And you asked if anyone knew.
Yes. Well, that's okay. All right. Fair enough. So yeah, the eitzim, and that we're not going to go in this direction. We could, but the idea of the Torah and a tree and wood and so on and so forth is a big idea in rabbinic thought and in the among the metaphors having to deal with Torah. But we're going to leave that for another time. Okay, so and the mountain, just make sure that everybody catches that. It's not just that there are pearls there, but the mountain is itself golden.
Golden, yeah.
Right? And of course, the rabbis in a number of different places point out that the Torah is worth more than gold. Okay. The giant said that surely such a thing did not exist. It's not a very helpful giant, I think. Okay. Sorry. All right, this is not doing what I would like it to do. What am I doing wrong, Kim?
Well, you're okay.
Yeah?
Actually, do you want me to move it?
Well, all right, sure.
We're up to the
But
last
here-
paragraph right there. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the
right
giant
here.
said to Shirley, okay, so let's pick it up there. The giant said that surely such a thing did not exist. But the minister began to weep and insisted that it must exist somewhere. At last the giant said, since you are so certain, I shall call all the animals which I am in charge of who run about the world. Perhaps one of them will know about a palace of pearls. Then he called all the animals of every kind, from the smallest to the largest, and asked them all that they might know, but not one of them had seen any such thing. Then the giant said, you see, they have confirmed that your quest is hopeless. Listen to me and turn back, for surely you can remove. For, all right, I'm going to move down.
No, you went too far.
Well,
Yep. Stop.
Right here.
yes, that's what I was. Okay. We cannot find what does not exist. In what way do we? What is the meaning of the animal's answer? That the pearls and the mountain of gold don't exist.
Well, to me, it's that wisdom doesn't come from other people, but I don't. That no one can tell you in the end.
Well, that's
But
true.
the-
But what do the animals represent? They represent the world of nature. And in the world of nature, one is not going to find this particular phenomenon, the pearls, the palace of pearls, and the mountain of gold, because it's not about actual pearls and it's not about actual gold, but something that is metaphorically exists. So are animals going to locate that? Are they going to experience that? Well, I know that these days maybe some people would say yes, this is part of the animal rights revolution. But in the days of Rabbi Nachman, I don't think he had this concept. And so
I think Kellen wants to say something.
Oh, okay, Kellen, you're on.
I just wanted to add that it seems like he continues to go and be told that this place doesn't exist no matter where he's searching. And this kind of felt for me like a little bit of a metaphor for faith, that can search for all of these things to prove that God is real, and scientifically that's just not really possible. And so ultimately he has to continue to trust in this journey and trust that it's real.
I think you're exactly right on the spot, Kellen. And to add a little bit of information to what you just shared with us, the issue we're dealing with here is the issue of domain. In what domain do we find the location, as it were, of God? Not in the world of science, not in the world of nature, and so on and so forth. God is separate, above and distinct from all those domains. That doesn't mean that God is absent, but God is not equivalent with nature. God is not equivalent with a scientific equation. So we don't expect to find God there in the same way that we might find a biological entity or a mathematical statement.
But wouldn't the Kabbalists say that what you just said isn't quite true, because God encompasses all of that?
That's true, but God is, the point I was trying to make, and maybe I didn't make it clearly, is that God is not equivalent to any of that.
Yeah.
So you don't. There used to be a T-shirt with Maxwell's equations on it.
Oh yeah.
Okay, and it had Maxwell's equation, and then underneath it said, "Let there be light." Okay, well, Maxwell's equation and light are not the same thing. even though one might be a good representation of the other, it doesn't make them equivalent. And this is an important point to bear in mind when we're dealing with the Jewish understanding of God. God is present in nature, even the creator of nature, but God is not equivalent to nature. That's the irony of creation, so to speak. Am I being clear, Michael?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
So you won't find holiness in ordinary reality, in the practical, in the physical. So
Yeah.
you have to keep going.
Well, you do find it in a certain sense, Judith. I mean, again, it's not equivalent to the physical, but within the physical, you will find traces. This is the term that the French critic Derrida uses. He talks about how God as creator leaves behind traces of his or its presence in creation. God is not equivalent to creation or any part of creation, but within creation, there are what he calls traces. There are little signs, little scratch marks, if you like, to indicate that God was there. You know,
Could you make this this comparison that in a painting there's no beauty, like all there is in a painting is pigment on a piece of canvas.
from a certain point of view, sure. Yeah.
Yet we look at the painting and we see beauty.
Yes. So what is the difference in you're an artist? What is the difference in your view between the physical elements that might compose a painting and beauty?
Well, the physical elements by themselves mean nothing.
Okay.
I mean, that's what they are. It's just dirt.
Okay. And how do they? What has to happen?
There has to be a human interaction.
Some kind of formative interaction. Human. If we're talking about human artists, yes, it is the framing, the combination, the
Understanding. Like an ant, if an ant is crawling on a painting, there's no there's no sense of beauty for the ant.
For the ant, yes, right. Even though we might look at it and say, it's really interesting to see the ant crawling on the painting. Maybe there's some meaning to it. But on the other hand, there are people, and you know a lot more about this than I do, Kim, who will make the argument either that beauty is a kind of quality or perception that is imposed on matter by the mind, but some people might say that it is already present in the arrangement of matter, the shaping of matter, and it is therefore inherent and not just imposed from the outside. These are two different schools of thought about what beauty is, and both of them exist, right? Am I right about that?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So this comes into play here because we're trying to understand what it is about this princess, who sometimes is a princess and sometimes seems to be a queen, but we'll leave that alone for the time being. What is her quality? In other words, to ask the $64 question, what makes her lost? How did she come to be lost? In what way is she lost? That's not so obvious. We get hints of it along the way, but let's keep going. All right, so in charge of all birds. So it was that the man walked for many years seeking the giant's brother. At last he encountered him, also carrying a great tree. Lord, I'm in charge of all the birds. I should keep them together, and perhaps they will know. Do the birds know? They don't know, but they can do something else that's important. What do the birds do? The minister would not abandon his quest, even though the birds didn't know where this mountain was. Still further in they were able to help the princess and the minister leave without their feet touching the ground. This is done by the birds and or the wind, depending. There are different versions of this story. Why is it important that the feet of the minister and of the princess do not touch the ground?
I mean, just simply in the story, it says that she's trapped there by more than a lock.
More than a law? Tell me more about what you mean.
More than a lock. Like,
Oh,
there's 7 locks, I
right.
think, if I recall the number.
There are 7 locks, yes.
But she's also somehow bound to the ground by her feet, or bound to the room.
Okay, and why does she have to be separated from the ground? What is it that has to be overcome?
I mean, if we kind of take it back to that same metaphor, you kind of have to come over all the things that you, as somebody who chooses to have faith, can see that could tell you that God doesn't exist.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point, that somehow what she is looking for, this golden mountain with the palace of pearls, has to do with something that is found when you overcome what limits you or binds you to the earth, which is not necessarily, as we see in the rest of the story, something that is a knock on earthliness. It's just that in order to find the spirit, as it were, one has to be able to connect with this other dimension, to at least be able to put the earth in its proper place.
I'm thinking about how the Torah is not supposed to touch the ground.
Very good. In the physical Torah, you can't be allowed to touch the ground. By the way, do you happen to know what happens if you drop the Torah?
To bury it.
No, you don't have to bury it, but there are things that you do have to bury. It's a good guess.
You have to kiss it?
Kiss it.
You do have to kiss it. That's true. What else?
Probably a special bracha you have to say.
Kissing the Torah is what's called, in an almost derogatory way, it's called kitchen halacha. It's not really law, but it's the law of, as it were, the kitchen, the informal.
Does it get unclean? Like when we touch the Torah, it doesn't get unclean. We do.
Well, that's a good point. We don't touch the Torah. Why? Because it makes us unclean. However, there's something else that's going on. If this is mentioned in an indirect way later in the story, and in the introduction, there is something that's made of this. What is it, according to the introduction, what is the methodological point of view of Nachman of Bratslav as he writes the story? How does stories in general, not just this one, what does he call that process of writing a story? He calls it carving. That you are, what you are doing is, and this is going to connect with what Kim will understand very well, and others of us maybe as well, as the process of art. It's not so much that you are creating something, but you are taking things away, things that are extraneous, that block or get in the way of seeing what is actually there. What the rabbis understand about the process of God writing the Torah is, I mean, there are different ways that this is seen, but one of the ways is that insofar as this is about the tablets, what God is doing is what some great sculptors say that they do.
Michelangelo said that.
Michelangelo is a good example. That
he releases the figure from the stone.
Exactly. The figure was always there, and he could see it, and others could not. And what his creative process was was to carve and to remove what was extraneous and which obscured otherwise what was truly and most deeply there. And this is a way that the rabbis understand the process of God rendering the Torah, transmitting it to human beings.
I think it's interesting. It's giving me some ideas about Michelangelo, but the idea that we can't really create, we can only release.
Release or reveal. And that's why reveal is the operative term. God doesn't create the Torah, God reveals the Torah. When God communicates the Torah to us, it's because there is some great truth that is being revealed, which we would not see otherwise. And this operates on a number of different levels in Jewish tradition. There are different categories of mitzvot, of commandments, that those of us who study rabbinic literature are familiar with. There are, for example, mitzvot that we would have arrived at anyway just because they're logical and reasonable and so on and so forth. Laws, let's say, we don't cross the street in the middle of the block. Okay, we don't do that. Why? Because it's safe. It's the proper thing to do. Did that have to be revealed to us? No, not really. That's something we probably would have discovered on our own. But can you give me an example of a halakha, of a law that required being revealed? Because otherwise, if it had not been somehow revealed, we would never would have come up with it.
You should not cook the kid. Yeah, cook a kid in its mother's milk.
Good example. A good example, right? Because it doesn't, in the end, depend upon scientific or nutritional facts. You can't make the argument that what is kosher because it's healthier for you. Just go to Sammy's Romanian restaurant in Manhattan. Does anybody know about Sammy's Romanian?
No.
Okay. Now, if you are ever in New York, I'm going to tell you this is a place you have to go to because it demonstrates a deep level of what kashrut, Hebrew kosher, is all about. You go to Sammy's Romanian, it's on West Houston Street, right in the heart of the Lower East Side. And you have to sign up for what they call seating. It's a very small place. And you come at a certain time and they put you at a table and they hem you in with other tables. Once you're there, you're there. And they have a little person who plays the accordion, and it's very, very nice. But here's what is on the table when you walk into Sammy's Romanian restaurant. First of all, the menu is unbelievable. You order a rump steak and it hangs over the edge of the plate. This is not, healthy food. And how do you know it's not healthy food? Because here are the condiments on the table. There's ketchup and mustard, yes. But what is the other condiment that you don't find anywhere else? Schmaltz. Does everybody know what schmaltz is?
Fat.
Yeah, it's rendered chicken fat. Okay? And it's delicious. Yes, absolutely. It is an instant heart attack.
Yeah.
Sorry. But what kind of restaurant, even in our days, has a pot of rendered chicken fat on the table where you would otherwise find the salt and pepper? Okay? My point is that when we are dealing with the basics, the components of Jewish practice and Jewish law, it goes from the ridiculous to the sublime, or the sublime to the ridiculous, if you prefer. Yes, we're dealing with very lofty concepts, but we're also dealing with chicken fat. And all of this is, at least to some degree, mutually referential.
I like to say two things.
Sure.
One is we need to quit exactly at 1 because I have another Zoom session at 1.
Okay.
The second is we wanted to talk about whether anyone objects these are going on YouTube, but they're unlisted. If anyone objects to having them listed, if so, we won't do it. So
Happy Bloodless student, Kim.
I'm sorry, if the video, we want the video to be publicly available from this class, because thinking that other people might be able to benefit from it. So either now or send me an email. No, I don't want that. And then we won't do it because we didn't announce in the beginning that we were going to do it. But otherwise,
well, I hope people feel comfortable with that, but if they don't, they don't. But if you have some reservation or some questions, please communicate with Kim.
We have 2 minutes. Are we going to be able to continue this next time, our discussion of this?
We can do that, yes.
That would be great.
I would be happy to do that if everybody is agreeable. It's
Can
a wonderful story.
Food for thought for next time?
I'm sorry, say again?
Can I possibly give people some food for thought for next time?
Absolutely.
Something I really took away from this is that each time he doesn't necessarily find the princess, he comes away with an item that helps him on his journey. And I was thinking, the Torah is so small. We only get so much information from it. So then we get into the Sanhedrin, we get Midrash, we get the Responsa. And so there are all of these additional items that we have to task ourselves with in order.
I think that's a beautiful additional insight, Kellen. And let's use that as a jumping off point, if you will remind us next time for our next class, because that is an excellent segue to the next understanding of the story. So let's do that. Thank you all very much. Shabbat shalom to everybody. As Linda likes to say, be healthy and keep moving.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.